Welcome to our Season 1 recap of Game of Thrones, Part 4, Friend or Foe? Last we saw Catelyn Stark and Roderick, Winterfell's master-at-arms. They were meandering back home after their trip south, trying to keep a low profile. But as Tyrion Lannister was doing his own meandering back to King's Landing with Yoren from the Night's Watch, they of course have the pleasure of bumping into each other. Maybe pleasure is not the correct word. Lady Stark, at this point 150% convinced Tyrion tried to murder her son, calls upon the aid of her father's bannermen to apprehend him so she can bring him to justice. So one dwarf and several men in tow later, Catelyn is on her way to the Eyrie instead, to her sister's fortified and nearly impregnable fortress on the eastern coast. Tyrion is promptly thrown into a sky cell. That's the Erie's version of a dungeon. And Catelyn implores her sister Lysa to help her. But Lysa is different than Catelyn remembers her. More screws loose than before, shall we say? Tyrion requests an audience, claiming he will confess to his crimes, but he makes a mockery of Lysa's court by sarcastically confessing to things like masturbating into a pie. He demands a trial by combat, and as per the king's laws, is allowed a champion to fight in his stead. Enter Bronn, a sellsword who gets the better of Lysa's own veteran knight and saves Tyrion from what was certain death. Yoren brings news of Tyrion's capture to Ned in King's Landing, and shortly thereafter, everyone else learns of it as well, including Tyrion's brother. Deciding to make matters worse, Jaime's specialty, really. He leads Lannister men into an attack on Ned and his men, in broad daylight, in the middle of the city, no less, demanding the return of his little brother. Finally, the City Watch arrives, but not before a bunch of people die. Jaime flees the city and heads directly to his father's newly established war camp, because of course, Tywin Lannister sees this turn of events as a perfect opportunity to 1. Declare war on the Starks, to show the other houses that the Lannisters are not a house to be trifled with, and 2. Tell Jaime just how disappointed he is in his firstborn son, but that it wasn't too late for him to become the man that Tywin wanted him to be. Tywin may be a brilliant tactician and shrewd leader, but he's also kind of a shitty father. To all his 3 children. When Tyrion actually finds his way to his father's military encampment, with a few hill tribe friends he made along the way, he's not exactly welcomed with hugs and tears of joy. Instead, Tywin convinces them to fight for him, in the vanguard no less, against the Stark armies. And he agrees to let his very inexperienced, very, short son, Tyrion, lead them into the fray. So Tyrion does what anyone in his position would do. He gets drunk with his new sellsword friend Bronn and a, lady of the night, whose name, she tells him, is Shae. One hangover later, and Tyrion misses most of the fight. But that's okay, because one Robb Stark has outsmarted the great Tywin Lannister, and there wasn't much of a fight there to be had after all. See, while Tywin was busy micromanaging his sons' lives, and having his soldiers killing and pillaging the Riverlands, as one might do to get back at Catelyn Stark for kidnapping their son in the first place, Robert Baratheon died, and the Starks were called in to swear fealty to the new king, Joffrey. But Robb Stark was having none of it. He called his bannermen to arms, and they all headed south, intent on freeing his father and sisters. He gives false information to a Lannister spy, basically telling him he's gonna take his whole army and head towards Tywin. But surprise, surprise, he marches most of his men a different way, towards Jaime's smaller military contingent. But they hit a little snag when they reach the Trident River, and the crossing held by House Frey, the twins. The only way to cross the river at the twins, without losing precious time doubling back, is to convince Walder Frey to let them pass. Trouble was, Walder was a few shades stranger than even Lysa, and no one wanted to chit-chat with him. No one except Catelyn. She volunteers to go ask him for the favor, because she's known Walder since she was little, and she's pretty sure she can get him to listen to her. Well, it turns out that Walder is holding a grudge against House Tully and her father. Catelyn's dad never saw fit to marry any of his kids to the Frey children, and now Walder's asked to choose between the crown and some other people whom he's got absolutely no connection to whatsoever at all. see where he's going with all this. Thus, Catelyn promises Arya and Robb will wed two of his children, post-war, of course, in return for the army's passage. Robb is mostly okay with this. Mostly. He'd probably do just about anything at this point. And Robb's gamble to trick Tywin pays off, at least in the short term, as he manages to capture Jaime Lannister, who's all, "Let's just duke it out as men, Robb. We can finish the war here and now, you and me, mano a mano." And Robb's like, "Nah, you'd win it that way, and I'm no fool." Lady Stark does manage to knock him silly upside the head with a giant rock, just for good measure. Only after he confesses to pushing Bran, but not to the reason why. Meanwhile, across the Narrow Sea, a plot to kill Daenerys unfolds. Robert had been sure that her unborn son would spell the end of his reign as monarch, so he ordered her death. Although Robert had a change of heart on his deathbed, it was too late. Varys' connections in Essos had already set the plan in motion. And, surprise, Ser Jorah was one of those many connections. A full pardon from the king for a job well done, specifically spying on Daenerys and reporting everything back to King's Landing. Yet, Ser Jorah had grown very fond of Daenerys. When presented with the choice of returning to Westeros or saving her life, he chooses the latter. Did he make the right choice after all? Thanks for watching Game of Thrones Season 1 Recap Part 4, Friend or Foe? Join us next time for the 5th and last part, Reborn. Next up on 7-Minute Seasons, a MindMineTV series. Love what you saw? Make sure to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more great content.